Okay, it is being recorded.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. So let me start with a little bit of background. And if you know this, raise your hand, make motions, tell me to move on. Also, don't hesitate to interrupt me at all while I'm talking or throw something in the chat. I'd rather do what you need and answer your questions than go off in a direction that's not useful to you. Starting off, Raft, as far as background. Raft was originally meant to be a short-term emergency program of up to $4,000 for folks who had experienced an interruption in income, but could now make it on their own. Raft's been around for about 16 years. It is now morphed since March into the cornerstone of the governor's eviction diversion initiative. You already heard about the numbers that were coming in, so I won't go into that. Folks are eligible if they're making less than 50% of the area median income. And that has actually been expanded through an additional program, which you don't need to know because the application covers both of them, but it's been expanded to 80% of area median income through the Emergency Rental and Mortgage Assistance Program, which is known as IRMA. So folks up to 80% of area median can submit an application and we'll process that. They're now eligible for up to $10,000 instead of $4,000. That's something that was signed in July and finally implemented by the state in the October/November. And then just recently, they waived some of the various requirements and impediments that were making it nearly impossible to use. And so now anyone who applies and is eligible for Raft based on their need can access up to $10,000. The rules, just generally speaking, you have to demonstrate that you have some form of housing crisis. You have to demonstrate that you have a tenancy. That does not mean that you need to have a lease, a written lease. You just have to demonstrate that there's some form of tenancy in place. You have to show that you are behind in your rent. You have to, or have other problems relative to the finances, because although probably 95% of what we use Raft for is for rental arrears, we can also use it for utilities when in this time when there isn't a shut-off moratorium. So in the summer and into the fall, we can use it for first, last, and security. We can use it for moving expenses. We can use it for oil. We can use it for gas. We can use it. Raft is extremely flexible and can be used for just about anything related to a housing crisis. What we need is become even more simple, thanks to a lot of advocacy that some of the folks on this call have done and others. We need to have identification from the head of household. We need to have, like I said, that documentation or self-certification of a housing crisis. We need some form of income verification, but if folks don't have it, we can use other tools that the state has made available to us to look that up or to track that down to get the income information that we need. Can you just be renting a room in someone's rental unit? I believe that that answer is now yes. We have seen that in many different immigrant communities in particular, where folks, there may be a tenant and then there may be someone subletting even within the unit itself. And I believe that DHCD is now offering that and allowing us to do that again, if they can show, for example, that they've been paying monthly for that room, again, demonstrating some form of a relationship, even if not a full tenancy. All of this, it can be found on our website, which is metrohousingboston.org. We hope that most folks will complete the application online. It's available online. Folks can start it. They can, we're now in tax season. You can start it, you can save it, just like you would one of those tax online preparation services. You can come back to it. You can then finish it and submit it. Trying to figure out what else around that. And then all the requirements you can, if the folks are able, they can upload the documents to it. The online version is available in English and Spanish. but I think we have 7 or 8 additional languages, and all of those forms, applications, and instructions are on our website. They can be downloaded, printed, filled out by hand, put in the mail to us. We're still accepting mail. In fact, some of Ann's staff are the ones sitting in the office daily, scanning the mail that comes in and making sure that that goes to the appropriate case manager and other and gets directed in the right way. So there are a variety of ways for folks to apply. Let me see, I see a couple of chat questions. Can tenants and landlords fill out a simple tenant agreement for the application? It doesn't need to be something pre-existing. It doesn't even need to be an agreement per se. If the landlord can demonstrate that they've been collecting rent monthly, or that the tenant has been there, that works. We just need some form of verification, and the state has, again, simplified that as we've gone forward. One thing that still gets folks hung up is, do I need a social security number? If someone has a social security number, they're required to list it. If they don't have one, it is not required for the application. You just put 8s. If you're doing the online one, you have to put something in or it won't move forward. So you go 888, 88, 8888. It'll let you move on. We'll know that that means someone doesn't have a social security number, and that's fine. One of the unknowns right now, well, it hasn't been. Right now, using state dollars, immigration status doesn't matter. If the state decides to substitute new federal dollars for those state dollars, we may see some changes. So as of right now, immigration has no bearing on someone's ability to access Raft. And it also doesn't, other attorneys might tell me not to be as direct as this, but as far as we're concerned, it doesn't impact the public charge rule either. So folks who are concerned about that, again, we've seen some folks who've been worried that it's taken some direct intervention and conversations to make sure they're comfortable with applying. But applying for Raft, which is a solely state-funded program, does not impact the public charge rule. It does not impact or rely on immigration. I think those are two things that are important to know. What can be offered as proof of crisis? Pretty much anything. We're taking self-certification for one thing. Someone can say, I have a crisis. If they show they've fallen behind on their rent, that sort of tells us that there's a crisis. If they can show us that they've had a job loss, if they can show us that they've been sick, if they can show us that their kids have been sick, we'll take just about anything. And hopefully that gets to all of my case managers as well. But we've been directed folks to accept just about anything as proof of a housing crisis. But by definition, if you've fallen behind and you're not working, you're in crisis. And we're reasonable enough to make that assumption based on that information that's provided to us. I will say what we've seen and the challenges that we've had in many of those articles that have appeared when we've dug down into them have been people who have started an application and never pressed send. And so the application is there, it's sitting there, but we didn't receive it any more so than if I was an applicant before it was online and preparing it at home and never sent it in. It's the same type of issue. So making sure that folks are aware that they've pressed send, that it's there. They get an automatic message, but if they're like me, a lot of people ignore those auto responses that come back to you or press delete or they end up in your spam filter. So making sure that the application is submitted and then making sure that if there's any follow-up requested, that follow-up is done. Because right now, and because of the overwhelming numbers, we are now denying applications after 2 weeks. If we've called and asked Chris for additional information because the application's not complete, if Chris doesn't respond within 2 weeks, the application's deleted. It doesn't mean you can't apply again. They can start over and do it again. It just means that that application is going away because we have 7,000 more behind it that are waiting in line. So there is, I would say, no for failure to complete an application, there's no outright denial. It just means you have to start over. I think folks get a letter, they decide, oh, I'm not eligible, and then they don't finish applying or reapply. Now, if someone's over income, that's a different story. Unless their situation changes, there are eligibility requirements for the program, but that is pretty much the only thing that would stop someone from applying. Some of the other issues that we have seen come up are where someone has already applied for Raft and they got $4,000 when the cap was $4,000, and now 6 months have gone by and they're still in trouble. They can apply again for the additional 6. They're not bound by what was in effect when they applied. They can reapply, they can get the additional $6,000 if that's what they need and if they're still eligible. But they do have to fill out a new application because we can't go back, to an application that's a year old and say, oh, this is where we were then. So they do have to do that, but it is fine and people should reapply if they're still in need, if they haven't capped out at the full 10. We will have some changes, I anticipate, because of the new COVID legislation that passed right at the end of December. There's going to be $400 million coming into the state, all earmarked for housing. A large amount of that is going to be for programs like Raft. And that there's advocacy going on to eliminate the cap. There is no cap on the federal dollars for these funds. There are some other restrictions, like they're requiring 8 weeks worth of pay stubs, which we've been trying to go the other way to simplify it. They're requiring that someone get recertified as eligible every 3 months, whereas right now with Raft, as long as you're certified once, you're free. It's good. So more to come on that because none of that's been decided yet. They're waiting for additional guidance from the U.S. Treasury. There were guidelines that were issued. In fact, I think it was the day before the inauguration, and those guidelines were not particularly helpful or useful in terms of what we would have wanted to see. So for now, you can ignore that. Just focus on Raft and the applications as is. We will process that. There's a couple of things that have come up in the chat. Applicant has to have an email address. Yes, question mark. To apply online, the person has to have an email address. It can be Yahoo, it can be a colleague, it can be the person applying for them, as long as they're willing to do that. But there has to be an email address to use the online system because that's how we are communicating back with that person. Jenny asked, what can we do to ease people's fear of applying due to public charge? We have flyers on our site. In fact, I'll do it, and if you can access our website, maybe you could pull down the links to those 2 flyers. We have flyers that we've developed in English and Spanish, and both of them reference the public charge rule and indicate that it doesn't apply. But I'll try and find those links too, if need be, but you can also find them on metrohousingboston.org. If you click on the link to help me with my rent due to COVID, it'll take you directly to that page. All of the applications are on that page. The 2 flyers are on that page. Pretty much everything you need in summary is right there on that page. Susan asked another question. What is the usual lag time from application to receiving money? Someone may be $2,000 behind in rent now, but if they get the money 2 months later, they could be $6,000. How do you decide? If someone is unemployed and likely to be further behind, we can make stipend payments. So we're doing that a lot, or started doing it a lot over the summer, where someone fell behind. It was unlikely they were going to find another job. Their rent was, let's use yours, $2,000 a month. They were $2,000 behind. We would pay the first 2, and then we could do the next 4 months at $2,000 a month as a stipend to ensure that they stay current for that time period until they reach the cap of the $10,000. So we are still doing that. We are still doing stipends regularly. And how we decide how much to give someone is based on their need. Can they demonstrate that they're not working, that they've fallen behind, that the rent exceeds their income? And we're being very generous and expansive in terms of our interpretation of that, because our goal is to get as much money as possible to as many people who are eligible as possible, as quickly as possible. Going back to the lag time, right now the lag time is still extensive. We have, we are now on to, for the most part, applications that came in November. So there's still, but we will issue, if there's a couple things I would say. One, there's a new state law that says if there's an eviction pending in court, that if there is and that Raft application pending at the same time, the eviction action gets stayed and put on hold. They just have to show that they have a Raft application pending. So that's on one side of it. On the other side, we will issue letters that say this person is eligible, this person is going to get X. Usually that's enough to get a landlord who's willing to work with us. As long as they know the money's going to come, they're good with that. The other piece is if we know that someone's in summary process, we will expedite the application. We will move those applications to the top as a triage method to ensure that they get a response as quickly as we can. The goal is to get down to a 3-week to 4-week response time from beginning to end. What we're doing now is within 48 hours of someone submitting an application, we are responding to them and letting them know whether the application is complete or not, and then letting them know if it's not complete, what they need to provide. So at least we're trying to stay in touch with people so that they know throughout the process where they are. This isn't something that had happened previously, so that's something new. Let's see, Alan asked, what advice for those whose landlord refuses Raft? Right now, we have to deny those applications if the landlord isn't willing to participate. But DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, has started working with a number of lawyers and others across the state, a mediation program. So that would be something we would probably refer to mediation, as long as the tenant was willing to do that, and then have the lawyers work on it with them to try and resolve it. That would be one option. The other option, which may come down, it is not in place yet, is the federal dollars allow for payments to be made directly to tenants if a landlord is notified 3 times and refuses to cooperate. So if the state ultimately adopts that, we would have a different option than what we have now, which would be better than what we have now. Emily asks, is landlord cooperation consent necessary if the tenant has a rental agreement? Yes, I mean, the landlord, because the state dollars require that the funds get paid to the third party, we need the landlord, a W-9 from the landlord. We need the taxpayer ID number from the landlord. We need the landlord to complete those documents and tell us what the tenant owes so that we have documentation of the amount that we actually have to pay. So the landlord does have to consent and cooperate with us. If it's for rental arrearages. Now, that's not the case if this is necessarily, if this is for moving expenses. In that case, we would need someone to show us that they have a lease and that they're moving. But in that case, we would want to know what the costs are and get it that way. I think, Diana, I answered that question. Does the money go to the landlord or to the applicant? It gets paid directly to the landlord. We make the payment directly to that third party. Katie says, we've been prioritizing Boston rental relief applications due to the lag with Raft. Is that a good call? Sure, 6 one, half dozen of the other. We're doing both programs. We're working along with, oh gosh, now I'm gonna mess it up. NOAA in East Boston and Project Hope to administer the Boston program. Either is fine. We have people that are actually layering those subsidies because one program isn't enough to provide for what they need. And so they can do one and then the other. So it's fine. Whichever you can get a quicker answer from is fine. And Kristen is here. And so I am now gotten down to that and I see her face. And so I'm going to stop and I'm going to introduce Kristen Ross, who is our Director of Financial Assistance. And maybe if folks want just continue with the questions, Kristen, what I've done is gone through general overview of eligibility and our website. But if there's anything in a more detailed piece, I talked about the lack of folks submitting applications being a barrier, starting but not finishing, the need to follow up, things like that. But I'll hand it over to you and I'll go find those 2 links and post them in the chat room.
Thank you, Kristen. I want to apologize to everyone. I was having major tech issues. I was having difficulty logging in on my computer, and then I lost internet for a few minutes. And honest to God, I think I just about cried. So, so here I am on my phone, and I appreciate your patience. So, you know, ordinarily or previously, you know, as you would imagine, Raft is pretty strict and restrictive, and the RAs across the state, with a lot of Chris's advocacy, has worked to reduce some of those barriers that people face. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know, I mean, we can always send that out after the fact and you can take a more in-depth view of it.
Kristen, I can share my screen and because I just had to get it off my work email to my home email.
Sure.
I'll share my screen and you can walk us
Fantastic.
through it and just tell me when to move on.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like you went through overview. Let's see. So in terms of the agenda, so this introduction, I'm sure you already did that. Raft Armor during COVID-19 process application, additional information and any questions. And then if you can go to slide 3 again, that'd be great. So, oops.
Whoops.
It's okay.
Technology.
Sometimes it's a gift and sometimes it's a curse.
All right, let me try that again. Okay, that work?
You're still on the second page, but if we can go to number 3, that would be great. Okay, so so IRMA was introduced this year for folks, and it's federal money, and it's for households who have an income above 50% of AMI and or below 80% of AMI, and so that really was meant as a, you know, to provide some supports for households which would ordinarily not be eligible for Raft, because Raft itself is restricted to those between 0 and 50% of area median income. So of course, the mission is to prevent homelessness for households facing crises in Massachusetts. It's a flexible benefit. All interventions focus on helping to develop or maintain housing. And the big change most recently, it used to be capped at $4,000 in a 12-month period. It is now increased to $10,000 in a 12-month period, which is very helpful for a lot of folks as this crisis deepens and folks aren't generating additional income or going back, or not being able to go back to work. You know, it certainly, this provides a great support for folks. And you can go to slide 4. Let's see. So Raft during COVID-19 is primarily used to pay rental arrears and future stipends. And again, having access to $10,000 to use towards rent or mortgage arrears. There's additional flexibility that has been instituted. So the sustainability component has been waived in the past. A household who could not sustain beyond the 4,000 or 10,000 would not have been eligible for rental assistance. Also waived is previously within a 2-month period, 24-month period. Those who are in subsidized housing would not be eligible more than once for a similar assistance stream. So if last year Ann came to me and she needed assistance with rent arrears, she lives in subsidized housing, she would have ordinarily had to wait 24 months from that disbursement in order to apply for rental arrears once again. So that's been waived, thank goodness. So also we can accept electronic signatures on our forms, and also flexibility on required documentation. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, so this is sort of the process. So first is establishing the housing crisis. Income application needs to be completed. There are required documents. I'll go through that at a later slide. There's the property owner paperwork or a packet. You send all the, pull all that stuff together, you send it over to Metro, and we'll review it. If there's anything else that we need, we'll get back to the sender. Yeah, and once that application is complete, we issue an approval and we issue payment. We cut checks once a week, every Friday. And for folks that, by and large, our vendors are requesting direct deposit, but of course there are those vendors that may not wish to use direct deposit, and that's okay too. And we can go to the next one. So step one is establishing the housing crisis. For the most part, what we're paying right now, as you would imagine, is rental arrears and stipends. We're seeing an increase in the number of mortgages and also the increase in the amount of mortgage arrears. Let's see. So this just runs down just the sort of the different crises that that folks may run into and that we would need documentation on. So if somebody's doubled up with a friend or family member and they must leave, a simple note from that person would, a note from the person with whom they've been staying is sufficient, just indicating that that applicant needs to move or move on within 30 days. Health and safety, that would be, folks are homeless or there are code violations which would make their unit not habitable. Foreclosure or mortgage arrears, for that we would just need a copy of their latest mortgage statement. Severe overcrowding, fire, flood, natural disaster. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Domestic violence, in prior iterations, we would request something from an advocate or police report, but a simple self-declaration at this point is sufficient. We certainly don't want to re-traumatize people. So when it comes to utility arrears, there is a moratorium in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which bars utility companies from issuing shut-off notices and terminations for electric and for gas. So at this point, we wouldn't be paying those unless there was an instance where a tenant was moving into a new unit, and in order to comply with their new rental agreement, they would have to turn on their electric and gas, and we could assist with that. You can go to the next one, yeah. So the next slide just focuses on income. The income in crisis are, well, more particularly income is one thing that we can't get a waiver on. However, yeah, so we would calculate the income, falls into these categories. For the most part, everyone that's applying at this point is qualifying. If you have folks that are say 50% of AMI or over 80% of AMI, in calculating the income, you can use deductions such as child support that has to be paid out, or tuition for education, and also childcare expenses. You can go to the next one. Yeah. So the housing crisis cannot be waived. We have to have something that documents a housing crisis. And of course, income can never be waived. Next. So we do have a fillable PDF, and actually right on our, on our website, we actually have an online form that folks can submit application, or you can assist your folks in submitting an application and upload all of those documents in one place. And that's in English and in Spanish. And then we also have a landlord portal. So landlords can apply on behalf of their tenants with the tenant's permission. And actually there are some sign-offs there that the tenant needs to submit along with the landlord's application. And then we also have printable applications as well, in many different languages, Portuguese and Chinese and Khmer. So there are, I think, 7 or 8 different languages that we can accommodate with a printable application. So 1 second, please. Okay. All right, and you can go to the next one. Sorry, my family was cooking something and left a timer on. So, okay, so next page. So this is just a sample of our application. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't require a heck of a lot of, brain power to fill it out. So this is just a sample of the English version of the application. And you can scroll through to slide 15. So what we need really in order to establish eligibility and move an application forward is an ID for the head of household. So it would be a photo ID or a passport. That would be sufficient. Legal immigration status is not a requirement. And also not having a social security number is not a requirement either. Let's see, proof of income for all members of the household 18 plus. So that's pay stubs, child support statements, and then proof of housing. So we can either get this up front or we can get it on the back end when we are reaching out to landlords. So probably one of the biggest, the most common document that we don't get up front when folks are applying, especially through our online portal, is something from the landlord or a property management company that indicates how much they owe, like a tenant ledger or a letter. We can accept just about anything, but we have to document that in the file as to how much is owed. And we can always get the lease or the tenant agreement on the other end if that is available. And then, of course, proof of crisis. So again, documenting the rental arrears or why somebody needs to move, things of that nature. And then financial hardship. This is really more related to, more related to for those that are in subsidized housing. You can go to the next slide here. Oh, the other piece that was, I just want to point out, under the most recent guidelines issued from DHCD, they had filed an emergency order, which essentially any applicant that is receiving any kind of public benefit like SNAP or Mass Health or DTA, et cetera, are actually eligible automatically for Raft. You can go to the next slide. So then we have the property owner packet. I know as I came into the conversation as Chris was talking about that. So there's an owner contract which outlines what it's essentially what the landlord is agreeing to do, essentially to keep the tenant in accepting these monies for a period of time. That does not mean that a landlord can't move to evict, in the months following, pending, non-compliance. So there's that piece. So W-9, we need to have those filled out or completed by the property owner or the property management company. Has their name, their address, their tax ID number, whether it be their personal social security number or an EIN number. So we also need proof of ownership, tying whoever's on that W-9 to the proof of owner. So that could be an assessor's database record, that could be a deed, that could be a mortgage coupon for the property. So it's pretty varied. And then, and we also, as I had indicated earlier, we offer direct deposit. And then, let's see, with that, we would need a voided check from the bank. And then so we do need a, for households that have children under the age of 6, we would need a letter of compliance, indicating that the unit has been, or that the unit is lead-free. You can go to the next one. Okay. So we do have the PDFs available on our website, and those can be, for the time being, can be sent to hcecreferrals@metrohousingboston.org. So you might include a referral, you would include the application, as well as the other documents that we need for the file, which would be the housing crisis, income, ID, and proof of housing. If you're working with folks on the online Cognito form, you can upload and submit all documents. A Raft manager will review and assign to staff a follow-up. That form is super handy because you don't have to, you can just upload everything into that in PDFs or Word documents or even photographs of documents that we need. And then we would suggest that you not have an applicant do an online app and also do a written app, because it just leads to duplication. We're really trying to streamline how we do how we operate, so that we're not running up against one another. Let's see. So once we receive the application, we'll reply as soon as assigned. Currently, it's taking 5 to 8 weeks. We want to get that down to 3. And then if there are any missing documents, we'd reach back out to the client or whoever the contact is for the client. And then, I apologize, I didn't change this. So we'll review it. And if the candidate has received, say, rental arrears in the fall, when the limit was $4,000, and now they're still currently in arrears, they can reapply, and we can, apply whatever is remaining within the $10,000 benefit to their past rents. Let's see. And then when it comes to subsidized applicants, they can only access 6 months of arrears, rental arrears. So that is, I'm seeing that's a little bit problematic for a number of our applicants lately. They owe more than 6 months of back rent. And then Ann, you can go to the next one, please. So once all the documents have been reviewed, file will be turned in to the coordinator for approval. And once approved, we'll send email confirmation, and we'll let the case manager know if a promissory note is needed, and that will be issued too. Okay. So step 10 is the check run process. So as I mentioned previously, we cut checks once a week on Fridays. So we've been pushing out anywhere for the past several weeks, anywhere from $750 to $1.6 million a week. So we are getting a significant sum of money out the door and helping a lot of families, and it feels really great. Let's see. So we'll issue written approval. And let's see. So we do, in certain circumstances, provide assistance for furniture and or appliances as needed. For instance, if the landlord is only providing a stove and not a refrigerator, things of that nature. And then let's see, additional Raft information. I think we covered this on subsidized arrears and tax credit units, and I'm up to 21. Yeah. So as I mentioned previously, anyone in subsidized housing cannot receive payments for more than 6 months of rental arrears. And they really have to demonstrate a hardship that caused a non-payment of rent. And, you know, obviously with a lot of folks out of work, very reduced income, it's taken some time, we think, for a number of housing voucher administering agencies or housing authorities to catch up with that, with all the adjustments that had to be made to recalculate the rent burden for the tenant. But in the meantime, we really need to get them paid and get them situated so that they're not at risk for eviction. Let's see. Yeah, and also with subsidized arrears, we cannot do future stipends. So once we take care of the arrears, we would not be able to lean in with additional monthly stipends. And then let's see. Tax credit units. So they're considered subsidized if the tenant's portion of the rent is less than 50% of the tenant's household income. And then we would just use the family's gross monthly income when making a determination for assistance. And then on to slide number 24. Again, it's demonstrating that financial hardship. That's any household living in a subsidized unit, demonstrating an increase in expense. You know, what we've seen quite a bit of is, you know, families had to secure internet, right, because their children had to be schooled from home. And so that's a significant. I don't know about your cable bill, but mine's about $175 a month, and I know for a lot of folks it's much more. So that's, you know, I would argue that all day long. If somebody came to us and said, well, I needed to get internet because my kid needed to be schooled at home, I'd say, okay, I get it, I totally get it. And also the increased expense in food. I mean, you have kids at home, you know, who everyone's at home, you know, so there's an increase in utilities, in usage and all of that. So I would go to the mat for that and have. And then let's see. Generally, well, on the applications, there is a checkbox that applicants can check off that just says that their housing crisis has been a byproduct of COVID-19. And I think whether you're fully employed or not employed, I'd say that we've all been affected by COVID-19. Let's see. So just a couple things just to wrap this up. So when it comes to moving people out of state, you know, for a variety of reasons, whether it be, you know, they're fleeing domestic violence environment, or they've found another job, and or they need to move back or move to a place where they're near their supports or family members, we can facilitate that. However, we can only do the startup costs and perhaps pay for a moving truck, but we would not be able to provide ongoing assistance once they've taken up residence in the new state. Let's see. And then languages. So we have access to, we have a language access plan. And so if there are languages that we don't have in terms of applications, we will always strive to accommodate a client where they're at and in their own language. So we do actually contract these services out. Yeah. So thank you. And I appreciate your patience. And does anyone have any questions?
I just want to thank you for trying to do this on your phone and trying to do slides on your phone. And I just want to say that Kristen works almost 24/7. And I thank you for taking the time to do this tonight. And I can share the slides with Martha, and she can share it with the group. And
Yeah, that would be great. Anne, I'm going to send you, there are a couple of edits I failed to make. So let me send you an updated version and you can send that. I just want to get the $4,000 number out of there. I don't want to confuse anyone. I thought I changed it throughout and I missed one. So.
great.
I have a question about documentation. Thanks,
Sure.
Kristen, for all this information. Could you say a little about documentation for people who have very little documentation. So you see
Mhm.
that in terms of income, somebody under COVID, somebody could say their income was affected by COVID,
Mhm.
and they can just write their own note, and that's sufficient. What about ID? What's the simplest? So for somebody who doesn't have a driver's license or a state,
Right.
what is the easiest
So,
ID
right.
option?
Yeah, I mean, I think in those instances, just as long as it's documented somewhere in the application, right? It's because having worked with the homeless community for a number of years, that's one of the first things that folks lose, and they become persona non grata, and so um, I would, or even if they've got somebody who's working with them, and so this is a social security number, this is who he is.
No social security number.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. And I know in the past we've had folks even who have issued, like they were just recently released from prison or from a jail, and they would use their release documents. So I mean, there are a couple of different ways that we could take it case by case, but in general, photo ID. But if there isn't one, for whatever reason, it just should be documented somewhere on the application. Just so we can.
What about an A number and no other documentation? Is that sufficient?
An A number? What? I'm sorry.
It's an alien registration number.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's
Yeah.
absolutely, yep, that's fine.
That's good enough.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, because the threshold for it, Raft is open to everyone, regardless of citizenship status.
But as the only form of ID, an A number with that.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Unmute. Kristen, I have a question because this has come up a couple of times about people who are renting rooms from
Uh-huh.
other acquaintances, and what kind of documentation do you get from what landlord? Does this have to come from the person who's on the lease, who's actually subletting to them, or how does that work?
So we just got some guidance on this recently. The landlord has to be aware, and there has to be be able to share some kind of documentation which indicates exactly how much that person is supposed to be paying each month. And so also to that end, we have to issue the payment to the property owner, right? And just in my own experience, having seen this quite a bit, you have folks that are subletting rooms, and for instance, they have Social Security income themselves. Well, they're now being given, it's recognized at the federal level as taxable income, right? So there might be an unpleasant surprise at the end of the year when somebody finds that they owe money for a taxable income. So it really needs to go to the property owner.
So, but it's okay for them just to have an informal arrangement with a friend who has used the apartment.
That's
but
correct.
Okay.
Yep, correct.
So after this, we know that there are folks who are needing help, but we don't exactly have a system worked out right now for how to match up folks. So is everybody on this call willing to have their emails and names in a Google spreadsheet? Are you willing to check a Google spreadsheet? Are you hoping to work through Katie if you came here through JP Rocks Mutual Aid? What are some thoughts on that?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike. Thank you so much for all of this. I am really, really new to this process and care deeply about it and have absolutely no idea what mechanism we're even discussing for plugging in and helping as a volunteer. So I feel that I might be way behind the process relative to everybody else. So I would So I think like, yes, I'm happy to have, I just don't want to have my name on a list and then some person that needs help, like be connected with me and go, all right, Mike, help me out here. And I'm going to be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm speaking up to say, sure, put my name on a list, but let's create a process that indicates that like I need additional training or I need to understand how I would even be accessed as a volunteer, real square one stuff.
And I'm wondering if there are some people, I think there are some people from Workers Circle Immigrant Justice Group who have a built-in set of immigrants through BJAN who you're planning on helping with Raft and might not want to reach out beyond that group. Yeah.
That's true for me, but I don't mind being on a list anyway.
Annie, do you want to say how it's worked in the past with matchmaking kind of a?
Yes, thank you, Martha. So what we've done in the past is we've set up a Google Doc with volunteers' names and contact information, and if they, speak another language. And then we also then have anybody that's reached out looking for assistance and they're willing to share that information, we put in, we'll call them, just for lack of better words for tonight, the client with their name, their contact information, probably a note column, and also if they have a language requirement. And then what we would want to do is to be able to have people self-select, okay, I got a couple of hours, I'm going to contact this person. So I will put my name in beside this person and I'll reach out to them. So that since we're an all volunteer operation, so that people can go in and select someone, contact that person and try to help them. And if they need help from, somebody at Metro, if they have a question or something, I can be the contact for the overall questions. If I don't know the answers, I can reach out to Kirsten and find out the right response. But it would certainly be a Google Doc that people would have access to, where they could self-select and reach out to people on their time. And, that way there wouldn't have to be somebody in charge of assigning and making sure that the connection had been made. Hopefully people would be able to make that connection and write in a note column, that you've made it or the application has gone in. So I've used that in a couple of different volunteer opportunities.
That was what mutual aid was doing. It kind of fell apart. Not to say that it couldn't work in a more narrow use. And I'm wondering I don't know if Alex is still on, but they've relaunched the matching process for broader needs and offerings that people have. What we're doing right now, if some people wanted to be involved in connecting with folks through us, we take hotline calls. We get messages in the inbox all the time. And then we have folks that are just regularly in contact with us for food distribution who often get in touch in need of support. And it goes basically through me or one other hotline volunteer. So if we know someone needs support on Monday, then we'll look at what volunteers are available and send out an email saying, hey, could you talk to someone this week? And then kind of take it from there. So it's not the efficiency of a spreadsheet. It's more of a trickle pairing. And the other note for us is the vast majority so far are folks who are Spanish speaking, most of whom don't have at-home Wi-Fi. So they need somebody who can upload documents and do electronic signatures on their behalf. But that's, if anyone wanted to get involved, we have a kind of hand-holding process for it. So you'd get me or Rachel walking you through the process.
If you have bandwidth, I think that'd be really helpful. And then it sounds as though there might be some use for non-Spanish speakers to help out with more of the landlord outreach piece. And So maybe there'll be a situation where a case will actually need
Mhm.
assistance too.
Yeah, as Kirsten said, and I've said, I think that seems to be getting the property owners to submit their W-9 and their proof of ownership. Seems to be the most challenging part. And this is where I am the boss, because when we pay property owners, we have to issue a 1099 at the end of the year. And if we don't have the right tax ID number that matches up with the person that says it is, Metro Housing can get fined by the IRS $50 for every wrong one. And they actually won't accept our files and kick them back. So it's really it's really important that we have the cooperation of property owners.
Also, in terms of working with property owners, when a landlord doesn't want to participate, is it because they want to get rid of it? Or are there other reasons that they could be educated on that would make them comfortable participating in the process and getting this?
I mean, I can speak to that. People don't participate for a variety of reasons. One is, less common is, I just don't want to receive any government funds. Another common one is, as you had mentioned, they just want the tenant to move on and they'd much rather take the loss. And then another common refrain is that they would have to wait weeks and weeks for a payment. But for us, I mean, especially if we've gotten to the stage where landlords are looking at completing their own documents, they're pretty far in the process, and we issue payments weekly. So the faster we get their material back, the faster we can get a check out.
So is there any utility to reaching out to landlords is really my question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Is there any utility to reaching out to landlords or helping the tenant convince the landlord to participate? I mean, it seems, there are plenty of landlords out there who are not going to get, this is.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important role that the advocate or you as partners play in this process, because you might have more of a local connection, right, to that particular individual, or yeah, so I think that would be a benefit. And also, there are a lot of scams out there that people are very wary of, and we're asking people for their personally identifying information, such as their social security number. So, there's that component. So it just, but yeah, if there's anything that y'all can do on your end, as partners, as advocates, as community members, that would be great. And then also, there's a language barrier. So at times, we have a group of folks working with property owners whose given language is Mandarin or Cantonese, and so we have folks that are actually they're speaking the same language, and they're having those conversations and sort of just working to dispel some of those fears of giving up personal information.
And I don't know if I'd be any more effective, but I can imagine if a tenant came to me and maybe, wasn't all that familiar with the whole program and was trying to explain why I should do it, I would just be like, yeah, just give me the money.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and sometimes, landlords just lose sight of the fact, like, this could help me pay my bills. Like, I have taxes to pay, I have water and sewer bills to pay, and tipping fees and things of that nature, and utilities and all of that fun stuff.
What about just logistically, if we're working with someone and we're the ones uploading documents, how are we going to get documents from people?
Mm.
You can take a picture and text it to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that works for almost everything.
Mhm. Yes, yep.
Fill
And
out.
so you can upload it from your phone?
Well, if someone takes a picture of their passport and texts it to you, then you can grab it from, well, you'll have to get it from your phone to your email. So that's just a trick that
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's very doable once you know how to do that. But then the forms, I mean, today I filled out a declaration of income for someone. And I read it to her and I said, do I have your permission to do an electronic signature? And she said, yes. So I filled out the form. She never saw it. And similarly, where I'm emailing forms to landlords and explaining to them the process because the tenant doesn't have the mechanism to get forms to the landlord themselves.
Right. Right.
Not sure we're doing it well, but that's just how we're doing it.
Well, have you had folks that were successful?
We've been doing the Boston rental relief application for
Okay.
now. We've had a couple, but we've had very tricky, confusing trying to figure
Yeah.
out multifamily sublet documentation, very little paperwork. So we're learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing a great job. It's not easy work, right? Especially if you don't do it all the time. And it's even without COVID, it's a tough job to do, right? But throw in the mix, all the stuff that's happening now, it makes it that much harder for folks. So we recognize that. But thank goodness for you, for your group. I mean, for what you're doing. What a tremendous service.
Great work.
It is. It's very good work.
Okay, I think this is a good place to stop.
Okay.
And Annie will share the recording or the chat or the slides or something. And we'll be in touch with next steps.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
know a little more than we did 2 hours ago, so it's great.
All
Thank you
right.
so much. I appreciate your time and your patience.
Thank you.
Nice
Bye-bye.
to meet all of you. Take care.
Bye.